Lamb. Yeah, you. All right. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of this world will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Simple little lines. Let's sing it again. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of this world will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Give the band a hand, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Josh. Mark chapter 1. You know, of the four Gospels, they often show the four Gospel writers in terms of the four figures that were before the throne: the lion, the lamb, the eagle, and the man. And that was taken way back by St. Augustine, that those represent the four depictions of Jesus as focused on in the four Gospels. In Matthew, he's the lion, the king. In Matthew, come on, Pat, say it right. In Mark, he's the bullock or lamb, the sacrifice animal, bearing the burden. That's the priesthood. And then in Luke, he's the man, the face of the man. He's human. Christ is presented as human and mostly interested in human needs and identifying with humanity. Well, if he's kingly in Matthew, and he's priestly in Mark, and he's the Son of Man in Luke, then in John, he's represented by the eagle, which symbolizes divinity. So he's king, he's priest, he's human, and yet he's divine. I like those ideas, poetic depiction. Mark is somebody else said, by the way, that Matthew was written primarily by Matthew to present Jesus to the Jewish people. Mark is written to present Jesus to the Romans. Luke is written to present Jesus to the Greeks or the Greek-speaking world. And then John is written to present Jesus to the church. These four, of course, anybody in any of those groups can read all four of them. But we're just talking about focuses. One of the focuses in Mark is that even though it's the shortest gospel in terms of chapter and verse, only 16 chapters, Mark is nonetheless more packed with miracles, page-wise. On average, not in every chapter, but on average, 3 miracles to the chapter. A couple of the chapters have 4 or 5 miracles in the Gospel of Mark. Now that's why one of the reasons it's thought to appeal to the Romans. Mark does not begin his gospel with a long genealogy showing that Jesus is the son of Abraham, the son of David, and all the begats. And Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac begat Jacob, and his brethren, and Jacob begat, and all the way down, all the begats. Luke does have a genealogy like that, but it's backward. It begins with Jesus and goes up. It says Jesus, who as was supposed was the son of Joseph, who was the son of so-and-so, who was the son of so-and-so. And Luke doesn't just take it to David and Abraham, but all the way back to Adam and God, who was the son of Adam, who was the son of God. Luke's point is not to show Jesus' Jewishness like Matthew does with his genealogy of Christ. Luke is showing Jesus' humanness, that he descended from Adam in a sense, just like all of us, and he's come to redeem the whole race of Adam, or provide redemption for the whole race of Adam, not just the Jews. So you have, in those beginnings, Matthew and Luke, you have two great aspects of Jesus Christ. Matthew and Luke are the only two that show the birth of Jesus Christ in two different ways. Visited in Matthew by the wise men, visited in Luke by the shepherds, and then the story is brought out. Mark has no beginnings like those. Mark just begins with Jesus getting baptized by John in chapter 1. Short description of John. Jesus going out into the wilderness. We don't have the three temptations, only that he was tempted by Satan and was with wild beasts, and angels ministered to him. And then Mark gets into the power stories. This man immediately begins, when he comes out of the wilderness, to work miracles to help human needs. As we come to them, I just want to talk about a few of these things tonight. And please, if you've got anything to add or throw in, well, there's so few of us here, you don't even have to raise your hand on me like I usually ask. Just interrupt me. I'm going to begin with Mark chapter 1 with the first miracle that we've got here. And that's with verse 21. And they went into Capernaum. And straightway on the Sabbath day, he entered into the synagogue and taught. And they were astonished at his doctrine, for he taught them as one who had authority, not like the scribes do. And there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out. Now this is the beginning of miracles in Mark. Jesus is dealing with someone who is psychotic or suffers from psychoses or split personality, which we're going to describe as the work of the devil in his life. His brain's all split up, but apparently this guy has seen Jesus doing some teachings, and he has heard people say that Jesus is the Son of God, or maybe it's a demon whispering this to him. But he cries out, and he says, "Let us alone. What have we to do with thee, thou Jesus of Nazareth? Art thou come to destroy us? I know thee who thou art, the Holy One of God." Now, I find that verse very interesting because the same sort of thing happens on the other side of the Sea of Galilee some months later. A man who doesn't know if he's one person or many people speaks to Jesus saying, "What have we to do with thee?" And Jesus says, "What is your name?" And he says, "I got too many names. I don't know which one you want. I'm all sorts of people. Just call me Legion." He had Legionnaire's disease, you know. And just call me Legion. And Jesus forces him to speak for himself, not in terms of the multiple personalities that had occupied him. Well, this is previous to that story, but it has the same elements in it. And the question that comes up in my mind is, who are you? I like to ask that to people. Who are you? What do you do? Well, I do a lot of things. I'm this, that, and the other, and sometimes I wear this hat, and sometimes I wear that hat. And I said, yeah, but I mean, I'm not talking about where you went to school or what your political party is or, what's your favorite sport or color or whatever. I'm asking you, do you realize who you are? And I think this being the first miracle in Mark, it begins kind of with that question. Are you many things, or are you contained as one person? St. Paul liked to say, this one thing I do. I'm all about one thing. I have one purpose. This one thing I do. This one message I proclaim. And this is all I'm about. He makes lists of things that he used to do. He says, I was this and I was that and I was all these other things. But now I'm one thing, one person. To be contained, or the shorter version of that word, content. To be made content is to be made whole, not fractured and split apart in pieces. Can I just preach a little bit about this right now? I think what's real interesting about Jesus casting a multitude of personalities out of this man and the later man at the tombs is that it shows us something. He wants us to be made whole. Jesus asked that question many times. Would you like to be made whole? St. Paul talks about God or Christ making us whole and content, wanting nothing. It means to be contained. If you've got a book in your hand, you could probably open it to its first 2 or 3 pages and find a table of contents. Now, that's all the parts that make up the whole. You get a can of Campbell's soup and look on the label and it'll say contents. And it's all the parts that make up the whole. We're no longer going to pick out all the green pieces of peas. We're not going to pick out all the little bits of potato. It's a whole thing. It's one can of soup. We eat it as one soup, not as many things. So being made content or one or whole or contained seems to be important to the Lord to do that for us. And so I look at that. The devil had come into the man and split him up into many personalities that were conflicted. You can get the idea of this guy arguing with himself and having idiotic, insane communications, and he's all split up, and that's why nobody has anything to do with him. The devil wanted to come in and put many spirits into one person. Christ does the opposite. Christ comes to this world and gathers many persons and puts them in one spirit. Let me say that again. The enemy puts many spirits in one person to confuse them. Christ gathers many persons and puts them in one spirit. And I think it's interesting that Mark uses the picture of this miracle to start with in his gospel, or his lists of miracles. And one of these demons, or maybe one of the personalities in this man himself, had some inkling of who Jesus was. I know who you are. You're the Holy One of God. And Jesus rebuked him, saying, hold your peace and come out of him. And when the unclean spirit had torn him and cried with a loud voice, he came out of him. And the onlookers were all amazed, insomuch that they questioned among themselves, saying, what thing is this? What new doctrine is this? Now they're calling it a doctrine. Not only that Jesus has been teaching in that synagogue before this incident occurred, but also the doctrine that we're flesh and bone, dust that we are to take authority over spirits and powers. This was a new doctrine for them. I mean, Elijah had power, but he just killed people with it. He didn't cast the evil spirits out of them. And we can look at other such things, but we don't find this deliverance from unseen inner forces in the other miracle workers of the Bible the way we see it in Jesus Christ. So this is a whole new understanding. God wants to give us a new spirit and take old spirits out of us. What new doctrine is this? For with authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they do obey him. And immediately his fame from this spread abroad throughout all the region round about Galilee. Now, I would think that this insane man was well known, wandering around the community, drooling, scaring little children, and getting outside of his house naked, and the cops had to, now, Mr. Smith, come back inside, put your robe on, all that kind of thing. And people pretty much avoiding him. But now he's the focus of attention. And the fame of this thing went out all around about Galilee. Everybody knew this crazy man, and now he's as sane as he can be and is able to talk plainly about the transformation that had come with him. The next miracle now involves groups of people, beginning with one, verse 29. And forthwith, when they were come out of the synagogue, they entered into the house of Simon and Andrew, a couple of fishermen that we had met earlier in this same chapter. And they've got James and John with them. We had already seen them, 4 fishermen. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick of a fever. And very soon they tell him of her. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and immediately didn't say anything, just took her hand and stood her up. And immediately the fever left her, and she ministered to them. Now that story is also told in Matthew, where she prepares a meal for them. She's feeling good, and Mama knows how to cook, but the fever had left her. And at evening, when the sun set, here Jesus is, a guest in this house, they began to show up from all around Galilee, where the story had gone out earlier that day. And they brought unto him all who were diseased and them who were possessed with devils. And all the city was gathered together at the door, and he healed many who were sick of various diseases, and cast out many devils, and suffered not the devils to speak, because they knew him. Now that gives us a very supernatural sense here. It wasn't just that these people had seen Jesus, but some evil forces within them knew who Jesus was. Now you can take this to whichever otherworldly view you want to take. Are all of these devils fallen angels who used to behold him in heaven back before the war in heaven that Revelation chapter 12 describes? Perhaps so. Is it just that because these things are wicked, they recognize what is good? And they've already heard people saying that's Jesus of Nazareth, so they call him that. This time, however, Jesus tells them to be quiet and don't speak. Now, I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit to the one that I really want to get to. We go down to verse 40. And there came a leper to him, beseeching him, and kneeling down to him, and saying unto him, If you will, you can make me clean. I know you can do it if you want to. Now that's the big question, is it? The Lord, does he want to help me? Does the Lord want to heal me? Or has God predetermined to give me this sickness or this problem or this trouble? Or is God interested in helping me? Does Jesus want? This is the man's question. If you will, if you want to, you can make me clean. I know you can. There's my faith. I have faith in your power. I'm not so sure what to think about your concern. do you want to help me? Because I know you can do it. Now, before I go further, let me say something about cleansing lepers. We've got the famous story in 2 Kings where Elisha tells Naaman the Syrian, go dip in the river Jordan and 7 times, and when you come up the 7th time, your leprous sores will all be gone. And Naaman dips in there and comes up, and his skin was as clean as that, we're told, of a newborn baby. Very soft and pure and clean. It's a picture of rejuvenation, recreation, so to speak. And of course, Naaman runs back to Elisha and becomes the first pagan leader we read of in the Bible who makes this statement, now I know that there is no other God but the God of Israel. Neither Pharaoh or Abimelech or, well, any of the other kings or rulers who come to believe in the God of Abraham, the God of Israel, but none of them say there are no other gods. Even Moses, in order to talk with these people, had to put it in carefully couched language because of their superstitions, that he is the God above all gods, or he is the chief of all gods, and that kind of language. But Naaman the Syrian makes this statement, there are no other gods. Even David had not yet said that in his Psalms. Isaiah would actually be the first biblical prophet to have God saying several times in the book of Isaiah, I am the Lord, behold, there is no other. There are no others. It's me and you. Work with me. You don't have to be concerned about others. Now, that's the big leper cleansing story from the Old Testament. Except for one other thing. In Leviticus 14, Moses says, he's in chapter 13, Moses describes all these various forms of leprosy by the color of the sores on the skin and different parts. And if these things come up on you, you've got to be cast out of society. You can't eat with people. You can't come into towns where people live. You have to live in the wilderness alone. You are consigned to a lonely and deprived life if there's leprosy on you. But in chapter 14, he says, now, here is the law for the man who is cleansed of leprosy. For the man who becomes cleansed. And he realizes God, he's been out there in the wilderness crying before God because he's an outcast. And he wakes up one morning and it's all gone. God has just healed him. But because he's been officially pronounced not to enter among people or be among people, he has to come up to the edge of the camp and call for a priest to come to the gate. And he says, I'm Freddie Jones. You kicked me out 5 years ago because I've been a leper. But a couple of days ago, I'm healed and it hasn't come back. God just took it all from me. And I would like to appeal to the law of cleansing that I might be brought back in. And the priests inside the city had to talk and say, who knows if that's true. One of us could go out there and touch him and examine his body, and then we'd be considered leprous for 40 days, and because we've touched a leper. And yet we've got to do that. The previous chapter, 13, said we've got to examine it. But that's risky. We could actually become lepers, not just considered lepers. Who's going to do it? And one priest says, I'll do it. Now I love this because he goes out from his safe and clean city. He goes out to spend 7 days with that leper, washing him, shaving him, inspecting every square inch of his skin every day. And the priest doesn't become a leper, because we know Freddie Jones is healed of leprosy. He doesn't catch it from him. But legally, the priest becomes a leper. Not in actuality, but in legal consideration. He is now a leper. I love this because this is Christ. He's the priest who comes out of his purity to be among us, the unclean, so that he can cleanse us, and he's not afraid. We're the sinful, and he becomes sin for us. He takes upon himself our uncleanness, even though he never sins. He's not an actual leper, but legally he is. And Jesus takes all of our sin upon himself. I love that. Now, why did I go into all of that? Because of what we're about to read. And Jesus, verse 41, moved with compassion. You see, Jesus is the priest who's not afraid to touch a leper. Moved with compassion and put forth his hand and touched the leper and said to him, "You asked me if I will for you to be clean?" I'm going to answer it, yes, I will. Be thou clean. I like that I will business. Do you want to? Yes, I do want to. What does God really want to do for our lives? And he could have given the man a Superman cape and some superpowers or let him learn to fly or something, but he didn't. He simply restored him to human life and human society. Now, we'll read later in Luke where there are 10 such lepers that come to Jesus. And he tells them what to do and says you've got to go and show yourselves, to Moses, to the priests, the Levites, and have them take you through those 7 days of inspection that Moses had demanded in Leviticus 14. Go and show yourselves to the priests. Well, 9 of them go off to do that. One of them doesn't know what Jesus is talking about because he's a Samaritan. He's never been taught Moses' laws. And he says, I don't know where they're going, but I can't go with them because I'm not one of them. I'm not welcome at their temple or in their synagogues. I'll just go back to the guy that just finished touching. And when he comes back, Jesus is surprised, it sounds like. He says, where are the other 9? Well, he knows where the other 9 are. He just told them, go wash and show yourselves to the Levites, to the priests. He knows where they went. But Jesus is getting at something deeper. Going to them, that's no longer your real priesthood. Once you've met me, you know that I'm the one you should come to. And he says, why is there none who came back to give God thanks except for this stranger or Gentile, this foreigner? And I love that. Well, this is the first leper, the earliest leper healing story in the Gospels, and that one is the last leper healing story in the ministry of Jesus. Yes.
You made a good point. The other two being Jewish, this one being a Gentile, he wasn't obligated to go see the priest.
Wouldn't have been allowed.
Well, I mean,
He's not made to do it.
he didn't grow up that way.
That's right.
So that might be the reason he's the only one to come back, is because the other two felt an obligation because of the old priesthood way versus this Gentile who didn't have that old way. He came back.
He did, and I appreciate you focusing on that, because he could have said, hallelujah, I've been healed. Now I can get back to my life. Go find his wife and kids. But he says, first I've got to do something. And I don't know who to go to except that man. And he comes to Christ. And then Jesus says to him what I was talking about earlier. Those others got their skin healed, but you, sir, shall be made whole. Whole. What new doctrine is this? To be made whole. What is it? People are looking at one another. What is this? Making us whole, as though we are not whole and content and entire, wanting nothing. Jesus is supplying the missing piece to our puzzle and putting us all together. And Jesus, the man is cleansed immediately. And Jesus straightly charges him, and forthwith sent him away, and said unto him, See thou say nothing to any man. Now this is what puzzles me, and I want you to ask it with me. See that you don't say anything to any man, but go your way, show yourself to the priest, offer for your cleansing those things which Moses commanded for a testimony to them. Go do what Moses said, Leviticus 14. It's going to take you 7 days to get through it all, but go and do it. But the man went out and began to publish it much, and to blaze abroad the matter, insomuch that Jesus could no more openly enter into the city, but was without in desert places, and they came to him from every quarter. So the cities are emptying out, people flooding into the wilderness where Jesus was. This sets the stage for various scenes, like the later feeding of the 5,000, a big congregation in the wilderness, the Mount of Transfiguration, where there's crowds waiting down below for him to come down, other wilderness events. Jesus isn't going from this point on so much city to city, though he'd like to, but we do see him go into some cities, but he's mobbed when he does. He seems to be, from things that Mark infers, he's out in the wilderness, and day after day he can find nowhere to get away from people. This is in the first year of his ministry, where he's growing in this huge popularity, especially in Galilee. By the second year, such stuff is going to be happening in Jerusalem. When he first gets to Jerusalem, he can walk around with his disciples and see different things. But after he does a few things, he begins to be mobbed in Jerusalem also. Now, it's that mobbing, I think. Does Jesus not like people? Yes, of course. He's come because he loves humanity. But he tells this guy, don't you go tell anybody about this. Don't sound it abroad. But the guy can't keep it still. At this point, a lot of the old-time preachers would break into an old chorus, and everybody would stand up clapping hands and singing with him. And what would they be singing? I cannot tell it all. Do you know that old song? He made my body whole. I cannot tell it all. I cannot tell it all. I cannot tell it all. Yes, he made my body whole. I cannot tell it all. He has taken my sins all away. Oh, and there's several. It goes into stanza after stanza. Or maybe sometimes they read this. Jesus says, don't tell anybody, but the guy can't hold it back, and he goes and publishes it all around, and the preacher will tell that and then break into singing something like, the song was just in my mind. Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know who Jesus is. Sing it with me, would you? Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know who Jesus is. Who is he? Well, he's the lily of the valley. He's the bright and morning star. He's the fairest of 10,000. Everybody ought to know. Old revival hymns make me think of this fellow who Jesus said, don't go tell everybody. They'll learn who I am. I don't need a propagandist right now. But the guy couldn't keep quiet about it. I want you to jump with me up to chapter 7. Those are the miracles right there just in chapter 1 in Mark. Let's come up to chapter 7. I want to show you something. Verse 31, Laura, since since you're working so hard to get it up. Mark 7:31. And again, departing from the coast of Tyre and Sidon, Jesus had just been over there on the Mediterranean coast of northern Palestine and had met the Syro-Phoenician woman, and whom he asked her the question, yeah, I'd love to help your daughter, sure, but I shouldn't be giving the children's bread to dogs. Now, why would he say that to her? I must take care of the children first. The children must first be filled, and not the dogs. And I think he was checking something in her attitude, because she answered, yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs. And he says, I like that answer, ma'am. Go your way. The devil is gone out of your daughter. And when she was come to the house, she found the devil had gone out, and her daughter laid in good sanity on the bed. Well, that had just happened. Now Jesus is leaving the region of Tyre and Sidon and coming back into Galilee, inland. And he came to the Sea of Galilee, through the midst of the coast of the Decapolis. Decapolis is not a name of a city, it is a group of 10 cities. Decapolis, the 10 cities. In Greek, the word polis means town or city or population. It's where we get words like politic or police, a city. So the Decapolis, the 10 cities. So he's not in town, but he's passing through that region that has the 10 Greek cities in it. And they bring unto him one who was deaf and had an impediment in his speech. This man is deaf and dumb. Now, he can make sounds. He has a speech. Because he's never heard his own voice making consonants and vowels. He's just trying with his eyes to see what other people are doing with their mouths and trying to imitate speech. But he's unable to hear even his own speech. Now, I know deaf people who are not so deaf that they can't hear the vibrations in their own head when they make speech. And even though they're deaf, they can communicate in some way. Maybe like this man, his speech was impeded. He had an impediment in his speech. He can't speak clearly, not being able to hear clearly. And they beseech Jesus to just put his hand on this deaf and mostly dumb man. But Jesus didn't do that. He didn't lay his hand on him. He took the man aside from the multitude. Just a minute, let me get you, come on, follow me. I want to get you away from all of them. Let me say something about that just for a minute. When he goes to raise Jairus' daughter from the dead, the whole house is full of people mourning and screaming. And Jesus said, get all these people out of here. Get all these grieving criers out of here. I don't want anybody in this house with me except the girl's mother and father, the dead girl herself, and you three, Peter, James, and John, come in with us. So the 7 people in the room, counting Jesus, the mother, father, the girl, and the 3 disciples. And Jesus just then takes her hand and says, damsel, I say unto thee, arise, and lifts her up. Why wouldn't he want that done in front of that crowd in the house? Why does he put the crowd out? Is it because some of them, are we going to keep up their skeptical murmuring and unbelief? We even have a passage that Jesus goes to one place and could not work too many miracles there because of their unbelief. He wants to separate those who are hoping with him and believing with him from all of the doubters and cynics and skeptics and naysayers. And I think that's interesting. And he takes him aside and he spits, apparently. He puts his fingers into the guy's ears and then spits and put, apparently with the spittle, upon this man's tongue. Touch the man's tongue. Or maybe he spits on his fingers and sticks them in the man's ears and then touches the man's tongue with a dry finger. It does not matter. But this thing of using his own spittle is also interesting, because there is, of course, a blind man whom we'll see in the Gospels who'll come and just maybe has no lenses in his eyes. Maybe they're just white balls. They'd never fully formed when he was in his mother's womb. And he's just been blind, kind of ugly to look at all his life. And Jesus spits on the ground into the dust, picks up the wet dust, and molds it into a little mud ball, and then rubs it on this man's eyes. Now, man is made of dust to start with. Jesus just takes a little dust and finishes making this guy's seeing apparatus, the cornea, the pupils, the iris, all of the necessary parts of the eyes. They're remade instantly as in the original creation. I hope you like what I'm talking about here. But he does it for this man. But his spittle, what's the deal about his spittle? He's going to remake this guy's ears and tongue with a little spit and his own fingers. Yeah, Terry.
I believe he does it to show a counter to what the ancient doctors used to spit on eyes and ears. They even spit on snake bites. Naturally, the doctors had no impact or no healing power. I personally believe Jesus used that, knowing that so-called doctors in the ancient times were using spit as a healing property to show the difference between their spit
Yeah.
and his spit.
Yeah. I like that. It's interesting. Anything else about Jesus' particular spit? Well,
They used it for everything, from snake bites to
yeah,
problems to ear problems.
as you've said. Yeah.
Kind of like the Egyptian snakes.
Well, it's, yeah, the asp and others. We can get into herpetology and talk about snakes in the Bible and all that stuff, but not the theme right now. It's this, in my thinking, that makes this important. Jesus is, well, maybe I better not say everything I want to say. There are fluids that come out of our bodies. We urinate, we defecate, pardon me for mentioning it, we sweat, and we bleed, or we spit. Now, people talk about the four humors of the body. You speak of ancient false medicine. They used to talk about the four humors: the blood, the mucus, the phlegm, and the bile. And if you had too much blood or too much bile, or they ought to be balanced, well, then your personality would be thrown off. Your blood is what makes you an excited person. Your bile is what makes you an angry person. Your mucus is what makes you a dangerous person. And let's see, what am I leaving out? Your phlegm is phlegmatic is what makes you a melancholy person, a sad person. And so they're all, it's an ancient form of both medicine with some kind of psychology. Let's bleed you a little bit. Let's get some of this out. Let's balance out the four humors or liquids of your body that can come out. Well, Jesus is going to give them his sweat in prayer. He's going to give them his blood in redemption. But he gives them his spittle right now in healing. I just think there's something quite interesting about that. And anyway, the man is healed. And he looks up to heaven as he spits on the man and touches his tongue. He looks up into heaven and sighs and says unto him, Ephphatha, which is one of the 3 times we read of Jesus speaking his own Aramaic language, and then the writer have it translated to us. Why say the Aramaic word, since everything he said was in Aramaic? Why do we have these? I'll tell you the other time, when he's raising the girl from the dead, he says, Talitha Kumi, which means, my daughter, rise. And then on the cross, he speaks in Aramaic and cries out, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which being translated means, we're told by the gospel writer, well, why give us these Aramaic words, these 3 instances? Well, I think Mark does it especially just to show us that this was Jesus' language. And it was a common statement. But he says it here, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And straightway his ears were opened, and the string of his tongue was loosed, and he spoke plainly. And Jesus charged them, the whole crowd. You just move the man away from the crowd to do this. Now all the crowd shouting when the man is hearing and speaking plainly. And Jesus charged them that they should tell no man. But the more he told them to shut up, so much the more a great deal they published it, and were beyond measure astonished, saying, He hath done all things well. He maketh both the deaf to hear and the dumb to speak. Now, let me just say one more thing about his spit. Your spit is considered to be the foulest part of you by these Jewish people. Moses, no, who was it? He says if her father had just spit in her face, she would be unclean for 7 days. Her own father's spittle would make her unclean for 7 days. To spit upon someone, and we would see people spitting on Jesus, is to make him unclean, to demand that he's unclean. Even in our culture today, to spit at someone is a great insult. Had her own father but spit in her face, would she not be unclean for 7 days? Quite a little thing. Here's Jesus' spittle that doesn't contaminate, does not curse, does not condemn. This gets back to what you were saying, Terry. His spittle makes whole. The thing you would consider the worst from him, even that part of him, makes you every whit whole. Don't you love these miracle stories in the Bible? I just thought I'd take a few of them tonight and mention them, and kind of show you how Mark gets all of this going. The last thing I want to say is that in 2 of these stories, we've got Jesus telling somebody, now don't you tell anybody. I don't want you to tell anybody. I'm commanding you not to tell anybody. But even he can't shut that up. And he says so later when he's riding into Jerusalem on the little colt of the donkey, and everybody's shouting Hosanna, and all of that. And some of the city leaders come up to Jesus and say, Master, rebuke thy disciples. They're making too big a disturbance here, day after the Sabbath, and the Romans are in town, and all of this, and get them to be quiet. And Jesus says, I can't. I've tried to get people to be quiet several times. The more I try to make them be quiet, the more they yell. I'm omnipotent, but I can't do that. I can do all things, but I can't do that. If these were to be quiet, the rocks and stones would begin to shout out about me. Thank you very much tonight. Any other comments? Brother Terry, anyone? Dad? Okay. Anything? Miss Barbara, I know you've been a preacher for years. I'm still wanting to hear you preach. I've told Brother James sometime when I found I was going to have to be out of town, why don't you get Miss Barbara to stand up and preach? And I bet it would be good. But what do you think tonight about these 5 little miracle stories? Well, thank you, Barbara. They're all excellent to talk about. Just the stories themselves. And, you know, I've been trying for over 50 years now, and I still say, I cannot tell it all. I cannot tell it all. Somebody that I know for years and is not of this persuasion said, don't you ever get tired of preaching that same old thing over and over again? That Bible? I said, brother, I've never preached it over and over again. I've never gotten to the depth of it. I've never gotten to the height of it. I've never gotten to every part of it. And I'm still trying, I'm still finding things in it that I never saw before. And he just shakes his head. Impossible, you know. But, yeah. Compared to searching what's in here. Yeah. Miss Donna? Well, thank you for that. I'm not looking for my compliments, but I wanted to know if any of you have anything. Brother Moore? Anything?